Hani tells the story of the best gift she ever received. She writes, shortly after getting married, my artist husband and I were still commuting long distance to see each other. So he made me a gift to show me how much he missed me. He sculpted out of 14-karat gold a tiny deer with wings. The whole thing was only about an inch long, and he mounted it on a piece of turquoise he had cut to look like a little cliff. My Cherokee name is Winged Deer, but out of shame or fear, no one in my family had ever honored it. Dan Mack, an illustrator, remembers. My first grade teacher, Mr. Applebaum, noticed that I liked to draw more than the typical 7-year-old. So one day he gave me a blue 3-ring binder full of blank loose leaf paper. It was the first sketchbook I ever owned. More than 30 years later, I've filled hundreds of them. Sure, it was only a bunch of paper, but what he really gave me was the idea that my passion for drawing was worth pursuing. Did you ever receive a gift that thrilled you? You loved that gift because the person who gave it to you knows you, sees you, and understands you. There's nothing better than the right gift given and received with love to make both the giver and the recipient feel seen. Perhaps the inverse is also true. When we receive an unwanted gift, we feel misunderstood, even sometimes hurt. And giving a gift that's unwanted can bring uncomfortable feelings of embarrassment or even pain. In this week's Parsha, we learn something about the art of giving. We learn in excruciating detail about korbanot, the animal sacrifices or gifts offered up to God in the ancient temple. And this week's Parsha arrives at a very timely moment in our Jewish holiday cycle. Purim, much more so than Hanukkah, is akin to Christmas in one respect. Purim is a holiday for giving to each other. Of the 4 mitzvot the rabbis of the Talmud prescribed for Purim, 2 require giving gifts. On Purim, we are obligated to give to the needy, and we are also required to give mishloach manot, or portions of food to our friends and neighbors. Purim is our holiday of masquerade and revelry, yes, but this holiday demands more from us than getting drunk and making noise. Like the korbanot, the sacrifices of the temple, Purim asks that we find ways to enter into relationship with others, that we draw close to each other through the sacred art of giving. The practice of mishloach manot may be a kind of antidote to the intense alienation and loneliness we've all experienced in one way or another over the course of the pandemic, because the mitzvah of mishloach manot does not involve clicking on an Amazon link. It means walking up to your neighbor's door, ringing the bell, and panim el panim, face to face, offering up treats. But this year, given the rising needs of refugees, it might be a time to focus more on the second mitzvah, matanot la'avyonim, the giving to the needy. At the outset of our parsha, God calls Vayikra to Moshe, one of only 2 times in the Torah when the phrase Vayikra is used. Why does God call to Moses in this particular way, at this particular point in the arc of the biblical narrative? Hold on to that question for a moment. Let's play Bible Jeopardy for a moment. If the answer is korbanot, what is the question? Put another way, what is the problem in the Bible that korbanot solve? I submit that the answer to that the question at hand is, how do we get closer to God? How can we connect to that which is larger than ourselves? The problem, therefore, is alienation from God. The word korbanot comes from the Hebrew root karov, to draw close. Giving sacrifices draws us in, brings us deeper into relationship. Vayikra, when God calls to Moses, and it is an invitation to deepen the relationship. You might ask, as every bar or bat mitzvah kid assigned to chant this portion has, Why in the world would God need a gift from a human being? And how could we possibly know what God wants? Leviticus, with its reams of instructions on how to offer animal sacrifices, is at its core a book about love and connection. The tools, the means of the ancient Israelites were different from ours, but the human desire to draw close through giving and receiving is the same. Leviticus is an instruction manual for priests, which sounds really boring until you realize that it's actually a kind of a manual on how to transform thoughts and feelings into action. Religious life, holiness, is not about abstract thoughts, it is about concreteness of action. Giving well is not easy. It is hard. It's an art to learn and practice. We sometimes need to learn how to give well through the process of giving poorly, giving the wrong things to the wrong people, or perhaps at the wrong time. Leviticus, with its detailed instructions, knows something about this. How to give, what to give, when to give. These are matters of life and death in the Torah. In order to give well, it is necessary, of course, to use your imagination, to put yourself into the mind of the other person. And when you give, you also reveal something about yourself, how you think about what the other might desire. That's part of the secret sauce that draws the giver closer to the receiver. The poet and philosopher David White has written, "To stop giving in any relational situation is to call an end to that particular type of togetherness." Perhaps that is why the destruction of our ancient temple was such a crisis. When the temple was destroyed, the Israelites were inhibited in their ability to give and lost that feeling of togetherness that giving the korbanot had created. The unparalleled brilliance of the rabbis of the Talmud lay in their ability to innovate, to craft a new way forward in order to restore our ability to give through prayer, through mitzvot, like the ones we'll practice this week on Purim, as we give gifts to those in need and to our friends and community. Giving is, in the end, an essential part of any relationship. The Tzvas Emes, an 18th century Hasidic rabbi, understood the command to offer korbanot as meaning that, quote, a person needs to offer to God his or her innermost strength and desire. Tzvas Emes was interested in the interior psychological nature of sacrifice. Maybe the most significant gifts, he hints, do not arrive in a package on your doorstep. He points to a line in Pirkei Avot 2:4 to illuminate his point. Make your will nothing in the face of God's will. Negate your desire, in other words, in the name of giving someone else what they need. Tzvas Emes goes on to explain. It is as if your own will becomes the sacrifice. Viewed in this way, korbanot are about assuming a giving stance, a way of being in the world that allows us to put our own needs aside in order to give another person what they need. In ways large and small, we all do this all the time. A small example. Yesterday, in the car on the way to swim practice, my daughter asked for a hair tie. And without thinking, I pulled mine out of my hair and gave it to her. She said, "Mom, I don't know if I will be able to do that when I'm a mom. Just give something that belongs to me that I need to my child." And I laughed for two reasons. Because number one, of course, a hair tie is such a tiny thing. It hardly felt like a sacrifice or a gift at all. And two, I knew intuitively that, of course, Hannah will do this once she becomes a mother. We change, our ability to give changes, grows and develops over the course of our lives. In a similar way, the Jewish people grew and developed, moving from the childlike system of animal sacrifices into a more mature version of giving that we find within rabbinical Judaism. Tzvas Emes is careful to remind us that the giving we are talking about here is not abstract. This mitzvah is about giving to each other. He demonstrates this concept by highlighting a seemingly extraneous word in one of the opening verses of our parsha. A person among you, mechem, who brings a sacrifice to God. The Sfas Emes notes that these words, mechem, from among you, imply a deeply communal response. The verse does not merely say when you bring a sacrifice. The implication here is that when you bring a sacrifice, you submerge yourself in the totality of the Jewish people, the collective. Being in relationship with God means being in relationship with each other. So the Sfas Emes effectively answers the question we considered at the outset. Why in the world would God need a gift from a human? And how can we know what God wants? God needs us to be among each other, to give to each other. When you want to know what God wants, go out and see what it is that your friend or neighbor needs and how you might satisfy that need with what you can offer. Vayikra. When God calls to Moses in this way, God is asking for closeness. God is asking us to draw near, close to one another, to put our own needs aside in order to do the exquisitely difficult and holy task of finding the right gift and summoning the courage to give it. Shabbat Shalom.
Asher Koach.
Yasher Koach.
Brilliant.